This week on LTC News, mixing technology and art.
Virtual reality, augmented reality, art that uses robotics, art that reads from the Twitter feed.
21st century civics.
One of the classes is working with Representative Nangle to draft legislation.
And HIV on the rise in Lowell.
A lot more new HIV diagnoses that are being made.
Stay with us. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. There has been a sharp increase in the number of new HIV infections in Lowell over the past year. It is a symptom of the opioid crisis that continues to take many lives in our community and across the country. Dr. Catherine Yu at the Lowell Community Health Center explains.
This is a trend that we've seen probably since the end of 2017. Where there are a lot more new HIV diagnoses that are being made, and mostly in people who have a history of drug use or who are using drugs at the time of the diagnoses.
The suspected cause of the increase in the number of HIV infections is fentanyl, a synthetic opioid mixed with heroin that is sold on the streets. People inject more often when they use fentanyl because its effects are shorter lasting than heroin alone.
When somebody injects fentanyl and it goes into the central nervous system, it happens much faster, but then it leaves the central nervous system much faster also. So in order to maintain that high, they have to inject a lot more frequently during the day. And there's some thought, I don't think that this is, we know for sure, because it just happened, the numbers are not there, but there's some thought that this is contributing strongly to this trend that we're seeing with the injection drug use in a way that was not there earlier in like 2016 or 2015.
Lowell Community Health Center, the City of Lowell Health Department, and the Life Connection Center are working together to try and stop new infections.
We've always tried to spread the word and educate the community about the dangers of injection drug use and the association with HIV. But we also wanted to make clean needles more readily available. They have opened programs more recently that allow full-on needle exchange. So it's not just distributing clean needles, but it's also taking in dirty needles at the same time. We offer PrEP. That's within the past couple of years. It's the most proactive thing that we can do. PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. That's giving a pill a day for people who have what we call high-risk behaviors that would increase their risk for HIV infection. And the pill a day helps to dramatically decrease the risk of HIV.
The abundance of used needles found discarded on the streets and in the parks of Lowell pose a risk to users who may pick them up to use them again, and to community members who may get stuck when trying to remove them. The Life Connection Center has trained volunteers who clean them up off the streets and a needle exchange program where users can bring in old needles and get clean ones. Last year, they and collaborating organizations picked up over 10,000 needles in Lowell.
If somebody finds it on the street or out in the community, we recommend just to contact somebody nearby who's a professional, such as a cop or an EMT, and let them know so that they can dispose of it correctly. The last thing that we want is somebody picking up a needle and sticking themselves and then being at risk for not only HIV but hepatitis C and of course standard bacterial infections.
Anyone in a high-risk group should get tested because if they are infected, treatment is available.
If they're tested early, they find out that they have the infection, we can get them treatment. So we have really great treatment. People can live a normal, healthy life with HIV. There's no reason to think that it's a death sentence like it used to be.
Anyone can go to Lowell Community Health Center for testing.
It doesn't matter if they don't have insurance. If they ask for testing, we will offer it to them, and they should not worry about the cost.
You can find Sharps disposal options on the Lowell Health Department webpage. Their next disposal day for unwanted medication and Sharps is March 13th. UTech is an organization in Lowell that works with young at-risk teens to inspire them to trade violence and poverty for social and economic success. UTech recognized that civics education was not adequately preparing young people to be involved citizens. They and a teen-led coalition worked for 10 years to craft legislation that would meet the needs of young people today. Thanks in a large part to UTEC's efforts, Governor Charlie Baker signed legislation last November mandating that 8th graders and high schoolers, students that are approaching voting age, do a community action project or service learning activity to gain a 21st century understanding of civics.
Civics is just the study of learning how to be a citizen. So not just learning about government, but learning how to engage in it.
3 years ago, prior to the enactment of this new law, 8th graders at the Fine Arts Magnet School in Lowell piloted a curriculum that introduced real-world civics projects as a part of their social studies class. Teams of students are currently hard at work advocating for bills in the House and the Senate, as well as filing their own bill, all related to issues surrounding vaping use by teens.
For civics education, we want students to engage in the real world. So rather than just open the textbooks up and read about people engaging in civics, we want students to actually get out there and do it.
We wanted to stop the amount of teens that actually started to vaping, because vaping is very bad for you.
The kids go through a process of identifying community issues, they conduct interviews, and then we build consensus around one real-world issue.
What I found most interesting about our project was seeing so many kids come together and decide on one topic.
And then we go through a process of conducting research, we have guest speakers come in, and we try to figure out how can we impact that issue. One of the classes is working with Representative Nangle to draft legislation regarding flavored tobacco products.
For our goal, it was to change flavor restrictions to adult-only stores. So it'd be like establishments that like sell food. You can't sell flavored vaping products in there anymore. Lowell already passed this, so we want to make it a statewide law.
One of the classes decided to work on an existing bill that's been sitting in the Ways and Means Committee for about a year that would add additional taxes to vaping products.
None of the money is going to prevention programs, meaning that schools don't really get the right education for their students to stop this epidemic from happening.
They have real responsibility. So it's not just opening up the textbook and reading about other people. They're getting on the phone with elected officials.
We're asking for a floor vote for House Bill 3998, an act relative to the taxation of electronic smoking devices.
They're coming up with strategies, they're coming up with goals, they're talking to community members about what kind of bills exist or what kind of bill can we write.
I feel like the coolest thing about this project was that we had the ability to reach out to so many people at once, because we called all 35 members of the Ways and Means Committee.
The students made all the phone calls. We had a call script that we created together, and we then followed up with emails. We created an email script, and the students followed up with that. Yasmin, you had Representative Stanley, right? You had contacted him, and he had emailed back with us. It's important to show students that they have the opportunity to actually not, rather than just sit back and complain about things, to actually get out there and have an impact themselves.
Teenagers actually can make a change in the world.
If you're ready to make your phone call, please raise your hand. So they're seeing that they can actually have an impact and that people take them seriously. So even though these students are in 8th grade, they're getting out there and doing real things.
It makes me feel really inspired, because before we didn't really know that adults would listen to us as much as they do.
If we don't engage in our process, then we don't really have a democracy. Democracy, the definition of democracy is rule by the people. So if we're not engaging in it, we don't have a democracy.
Because of the success of the civics program at the Fine Arts Magnet School and the new civics law, the curriculum will be adopted district-wide this year. The new legislation also requires schools to offer voter registration drives so that documented citizens 16 and older are allowed to pre-register to vote if they will be 18 by the next election. The International 404 Festival has come to the United States for the first time, and it's at UMass Lowell. It's an interactive festival that unites art and technology run by a nonprofit based in Argentina. Its main objective is to democratize culture through performances, virtual reality, and interactive exhibits where spectators become part of the art.
This show is incredibly exciting, and we have a rich variety of artwork to introduce viewers to virtual reality, augmented reality, art that uses robotics, art that reads from the Twitter feed to deal with important issues like racism and homelessness. We have iPads and laptops and simulated pets.
404 is from that old internet announcement, 404 file not found. So it's this idea that, you know, we're somehow involved in the system, the electronic system, and that maybe we're causing mischief inside that system. And so a lot of the projects are dealing with technology and maybe creating problems with the technology or making it work in ways it wasn't designed to in the first place.
After Ellen proposed bringing the 404 Festival to the gallery and the gallery committee voted on that, we started working together on plans to select the artists. We've both worked very closely with 404 Festival founder Gina Valente from Argentina to bring the festival here. And over the summer, we knew we needed more money than we normally need for gallery exhibits, so we started writing grants together. We were successful in getting grants from the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the Lowell Cultural Council have all been very generous with us. We've also gotten extra funding from the Dean of Fine Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, Dean Louis Falcone. Ellen reached out to the Nerve Center and the Computer Science Department and got some additional funding from them to bring artist Hyunju Kim with the Tweetbot here from Korea. So it's just been this, you know, I want to say miraculous, but it's not exactly miraculous because there was a lot of work that was involved, but people have been generous once they understood what we were trying to do with bringing this festival to Lowell.
And we have Hyunju Kim's Tweetbot, which looks for lonely people on the Twitter feed, and if it finds you, if you put in your Twitter feed something along the lines of being alone or feeling lonesome, it'll send you back a little piece of poetry to help you feel better. You know? So the Twitter bot itself is a little spider-looking robot.
This piece here is by an artist from Taiwan, Lin Pei Xuan. It's called The Documentation of the Making of Eve Clone. These images are superimposed over Leonardo da Vinci drawings of the Vitruvian Man. When you hold the Android up to the screen, it reads the image, and then when you click on it, it plays a video in which like the head turns and the eyes open. And it's a really interesting augmented reality piece for viewers to explore.
And we also have another robot by Hayun Nam, who is currently teaching in Louisiana, but she has roots in the area, and her Twitter bot is looking for racist comments in the Twitter feed, and we put it up on MLK Day, and it's very busy. It has a lot of things to report on, so it only reports on those things that it hears in Twitter.
In Lowell, we have the space, we also have the technology and the community to bring this to, so it's really this perfect, ideal environment for the 404 Festival of Art and Technology.
Plus, I have all of these artists around me in New England that are really good at working with technology.
The festival is free and open to the public. It runs through March 5th at various campus locations. The first city festival of the year is just around the corner. Winterfest will take place downtown on Friday, February 22nd and Saturday, February 23rd. Here's what you'll need to know to get the best experience of Winterfest 2019.
Well, Winterfest is many things, but Winterfest is an entire weekend of fun activities for families and for kids. This year, Winterfest will take place on February 22nd and 23rd. On February 22nd, Winterfest will be from 5 to 10. On February 23rd, from 12 to 10. We're going to have some returning favorite things for Winterfest, like the skating rink on JFK Plaza. We have a winter market on JFK Plaza where local vendors will be selling some of their goods. This year we also have the carousel, which is returning on Arkham Drive. Kids really do enjoy that. And also a new thing that we have this year, we have street curling, which will be set up also on Arkham Drive. We have 2 stages and an entire weekend of music.
25 years and my life is still trying to get on that great big hill of hope for destination.
On Saturday we have a chocolate festival at St. Anne's Church. And also the ever popular soup contest is coming back on Saturday the 23rd from 12 to 2:30. So we have over a dozen local restaurants that will be preparing delicious soups. Winterfest is a very family-friendly festival, and you really need to get here to experience it. You know, we hope that if you have never been to Winterfest, that you will give it a try, and we are sure that you will have a great time.
In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott sits down with MCC Trustees Chairman James Campbell.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Scott, the Enterprise Editor at The Sun. Thanks for tuning into this latest edition of Sunspot. I should note that this is the 85th edition of Sunspot, and we have a very special guest with us today to celebrate that impressive milestone. I've known this guy for a long, long time, going back to when I was a cub reporter. Jim Campbell, former city manager, Jim Campbell. And Jim has... Good memories. We do have good memories, yeah. Jim is wearing a different hat these days. He's the chairman of the Middlesex College Board of Trustees, and he's been in the press quite a bit lately. Well, actually, since you took over at Middlesex about 3 or 4 years ago, and a lot of good headlines. Although last week at the Board of Trustees meeting, which was covered by The Sun, you took up a sensitive topic where some faculty and adjunct professors and others have voted no confidence in the president, Jim Mabry, who's been there now, what, about 4 years?
About 4 years.
Taking over from the Venerable Carol Cowan. So, you know, we could spend 2 hours talking about this, but I was just hoping we could cut to the quick a little bit. Sure. In preparing for this interview, I put MCC into our archives back at the newspaper, and a lot of positive stories came up. Stories about online learning, stories about belt tightening, and there were some others. A STEM grant that the state government had given in conjunction with Northeastern University. So if you kind of look at those in their totality, and then you see what happened at the Board of Trustees meeting last week about the no confidence vote, boy, you know, the reasonable person would be left scratching their head. So could you enlighten us and maybe tell us what you think is happening there at Middlesex and what you're trying to do about it to get to the bottom of it?
Well, I'm somewhat scratching my own head because I was surprised to see the results of the survey. However, I want to add that we take it very seriously, and I've read all the remarks. We listened to the union representatives, and in my role, I want to get to the bottom of this, and I believe we're just starting the process. Less than a day later, we were able to put together a meeting with the union and an ad hoc committee that I established of board members, and then we're going to meet tomorrow afternoon. So we do take it seriously. I want to get to the bottom of it. I read it like everyone else. And I was surprised because... So,
excuse, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just have to a few times. So you weren't aware, when that came before the Board of Trustees meeting last week, were you aware that the survey had been underway, or was that pretty much the first you had heard about it?
The survey itself, I knew the board, they were coming. The board voted the last time. There was a motion by a member to bring the union before. We have the students come before the board, and a motion was made, why don't we hear from the unions? And we voted, and it was 11-0.
And who made that motion?
If I remember correctly, Trustee O'Connor.
Trustee O'Connor from Lowell, who has been critical of the administration.
Well, I think our job is oversight, and I'd rather call it oversight than
that's fine.
criticism. So at that point, I cautioned the board about our role of oversight and management, and that we should not step over that. And I just wanted to make them aware of that. So we agreed at the next meeting we would invite a union representative to speak to us. Did I know about the survey? I started to pick up some stories and rumors and asked if I could get some information through the president's office. We have a secretary to the board. And we were trying to get that information, and apparently information like that had to be voted on by the executive board of the union to be released. As a matter of fact, we have a deadline when agenda material will come to the board, so we can send it out days in advance so they know what we're talking about at the meeting. So that didn't happen till the night before the meeting, and the morning of the meeting, the head of the union came up and explained to me that the reason that we didn't get any information was because the executive board had to vote on it, and that she would like to hand out the material, and I agreed.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I can understand that, and I wanted to cooperate, and I was quite surprised at the results of the survey.
A quick question, when Trustee O'Connor made that motion to bring in the union, that would have been during the January meeting? Or perhaps?
No, it was actually the November meeting. We meet with the students. We invite students to our student government to the December meeting.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Right.
All right.
So there was a meeting in between.
So I'm just curious, was
holidays.
there any follow-up on your part with Trustee O'Connor after she made that motion and it was approved 11-0 to bring in the union? Hey, what's going on with the, did anyone ask that trustee, hey, what's going on with the union?
No, because it came in, she just simply said, it might not be a bad idea. We hear from the students. Maybe we should hear from the union. And
do you think that Trustee O'Connor at that point knew that the survey was underway? It had to have been underway by that point.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
No?
I think that happened. I think that happened in the interim.
Okay.
I expected the union to come in and we'd start an ongoing dialogue, which I had no problem with.
Okay.
Instead, we got this report, and that was rather surprising.
How convincing, you said earlier you're taking the numbers very seriously, which you should as the chairman. Our reporter who covered that meeting, Rick Sobey, he did a great job. He reported that of the roughly, and I'm just kind of rounding up here, roughly 200 full-time members, full-time faculty members at Middlesex. About 1/2 responded to the survey, and 58% voted no confidence. Those aren't overwhelming numbers. How do you view those numbers?
Well, if we didn't have so many positives, and I could go into them, but I know we have a time limit here that I've observed about the school, and I'll just sum it up by saying that we were picked #1.
That's fine.
of
Take
all
your time.
community colleges in the state based on information from the U.S. Department of Education. So that says something. We've got that in the agenda, or on the on our balance sheet, and so now this report comes in, and my remarks were that there was a disconnect. I want to get to the bottom of that. How can we be #1 over here? We also had a letter from the commissioner who evaluates.
Which is right here? Yep.
Yeah, the commissioner evaluates the president, as well as, we put a lot of time into the board. We have a subcommittee that meets probably, I'm going to say, maybe 10, 12 hours, and then we bring it to the full board, and they meet probably another 2 meetings, interview the president, go over goals and those types of things, and come up with an evaluation. Then that is sent to the Commissioner of Education. He does an in-depth, his responsibility is to interview all the presidents of all the colleges. And he came back with a glowing report. And I know, as being a former commissioner in the state, I had that responsibility, and not everyone got a glowing report.
And that letter from Carlos Santiago here is dated December 12th.
That's correct. That came in, I'm going to say, I don't know when it came in, but it's dated December. It came in sometime after the December meeting. So my normal process is at the next board meeting, I share a lot of information. I have a section in where I say, commissioners, I'm no longer a commissioner.
That's okay.
The chairman's remarks, and I bring them in, and I usually say something. I might have highlighted some of the, and so I did. It came in. If it had come in November, I would have given it to them at the December meeting. But
you said something off air that I'd just like you to elaborate on a little bit. When you joined the board and you were appointed by the governor, you joined the board with Annie O'Connor from Lowell, the trustee that we talked about earlier, and also Beaufort Malone of Enterprise Bank. She ran for Congress. She lives in Bedford. And when you joined, you said off the air that there were these voices and that there were these forces that were talking to you about that. This guy Jim Mabry, He's not good for this position. He's not part of the community. And you listen to that, as you always do. You keep an open mind. But then you got in there, and you made your own determination. Can you tell us about that?
Right. I was surprised at the number of people that, let's say, were whispering in my ear that, you know, that there's issues or problems. And I made up my, I knew there was, I mean, I live in the community, and there was controversy when President Mabry was appointed, and and some issues about staff during that period. But I made up my mind that I was going to go in and experience his management, his style, and what was happening, and I was very impressed. I felt that after a very short period of time, I was convinced that this guy was the real deal, and that he brought a great deal of experience to the community college, that he was looking to make changes to streamline management, to look closely at the finances, which were getting tighter and tighter, to be able to increase enrollment, to look at new ways and means to improve the college, try and establish relationships with the community itself. For example, Lowell, we have a much stronger relationship with
Unfortunately, we
Lowell.
only have 2 minutes left, but go ahead.
With other institutions, Lowell General Hospital, the Community Health Center, the Lowell Plan, the business group in the city.
And you said in
city
Bedford, too. Off air, you were talking about his relationships in Bedford.
In Bedford, and I don't have as much contact in Bedford, but I've talked to the former town manager who was there 30 years, who just left, and the new town manager, and both are very impressed with Jim Mabry and his involvement in the community.
And didn't you say that the town of Bedford asked him to be on the search committee to hire the new?
For the new town manager. I think that's a pretty good honor.
All right, I'd like to just move this on a little bit, Jim, just to try to hit on a couple of other things. So we're talking on February 6th. The show airs for the next couple of weeks. The ad hoc subcommittee is meeting on February 7th. Which is tomorrow. And then what's the timetable moving forward, and how much time does the ad hoc subcommittee have to do its work before it brings it back to the full board, and then the full board can somehow digest all this and chart a course going forward?
The next meeting, which I think is the 28th, but it will take as many meetings as it requires. I want to make one thing perfectly clear, that I take this very seriously, and that I admire the union. I admire the people who work at Middlesex Community College. They brought this to our attention, and I think it's our responsibility to follow up on it. And my main goal is to, if there appears to be gaps that have to be closed, and we're going to work with the administration and with the union to do that. And I'm trying not to be biased on this on either side. I want to look at it objectively and move from there. And that's
your
the
role
way I
as the
feel.
chairman, right?
That is my role, and I take it very seriously. We have wonderful people, wonderful staff at the school. And like every other place, budgets are tight, and getting tighter. Out of enrollment is part of a demographic issue more than Massachusetts. It's national. The numbers are going
We did
down.
a story on that as well.
Yeah, you did.
Yep.
You did.
Yep.
And you know, and I should add that we do receive great coverage from the newspaper.
Thank you.
Some of it
You might
would rather not have, but
we'll always
in
call you.
balance, it's right, exactly. And
all right,
but
Jim.
again, I just want to make a closing statement that I plan personally, and I know members of the board, and I know that the two of the members of the board of the ad hoc committee probably have 50 years of college experience as a vice president and dean, and I think that they will help us tremendously to get to the bottom of this.
That's it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 899, online at ltc.org, on Roku at LTC Lowell, or get the link on Facebook. I'm Alanna Flood. Thanks for joining us.